So let's look at our big yielder here. Our big yielder of energy is going to be aerobic respiration. Okay. Again, like I said, whether it's anaerobic or aerobic, the very first step is always glycolysis. Very first step is always glycolysis. 2 pyruvates, 2 NADHs, 2 net ATP. Okay, that's always the case. NADHs go to the electron transport chain. Pyruvate enters into that transition reaction. Pyruvate is escorted into the mitochondria. And as soon as it enters into the mitochondria, it undergoes a chemical reaction. That chemical reaction is to convert that pyruvate or pyruvic acid, add a little bit of coenzyme A, and become this thing called acetyl-CoA. Let me just go here to this chemical reaction. Okay, there's your pyruvate molecule. Combine it with a little coenzyme A, and we make acetyl-CoA. This thing here goes to the next step. What's the next step? Citric acid cycle. NADH. We know where that goes. To the electron transport chain. So as soon as pyruvate gets escorted into the mitochondria, this process happens. This chemical reaction happens. We also get a waste product, which they don't show on that thing. Waste. And obviously that's removed from the cell. Since we get 2 molecules of pyruvate from glycolysis, we get 2 molecules of acetyl-CoA. I get 2 NADHs. I get 2 CO2s. Carbon dioxide. Where does this happen? In the matrix of the mitochondria. All over the matrix, this is happening. Okay. You're bringing in more than 1 glucose molecule at a time. You're making multiple pyruvates all over the place in the cytoplasm. So these are entering all over the aspects of the mitochondria, and these reactions, this transition reaction, is happening all over the matrix of the mitochondria. Acetyl-CoA enters in to the picture here. And as soon as we form acetyl-CoA, it'll start undergoing the citric acid cycle, the Kreb cycle, or the tricarboxylic acid cycle. Okay. I usually put it on the exam as either the citric or the Krebs. Okay. Citric acid cycle or Krebs. It's called citric acid because that's one of the first creatures that are there that are formed in the process. It's referred to as Kreb cycle because that's the dude who discovered this whole phenomena. And tricarboxylic acid, it's called that because one of the first creatures that are there is a 3-carbon creature. Okay. So that's why it has a whole buttload of names. Citric acid and Krebs are probably the only 2 you're going to see on the exam. So that CO2 gets removed from the cell, it's waste. 2 NADHs go to the electron transport chain, again, staying inside the mitochondria. But acetyl-CoA enters into Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle. Acetyl-CoA combines with the end product of the citric acid cycle, and that is oxaloacetate or oxaloacetic acid. And the first thing we form is citric acid. This is a cycle. Every time citric acid cycle turns, or every time Krebs cycle turns, oxaloacetate is formed. Acetyl-CoA always comes in and combines with oxaloacetate to form citric acid. Okay, so the end result is the first step in the process. It's cyclical. And as long as you have enough carbohydrates, guys, this cycle continues to happen. If you go no carb, you cannot form enough of these intermediates. Okay, you can't form enough of these intermediates here. Isocitrate, citrate, alpha ketoglutarate, succinyl fumarate, malate, oxaloacetate. Okay, you cannot continue to recycle all of these intermediates in the citric acid cycle. And I'm not going to ask you all the intermediates. I don't really care. Okay. So you have to have some carbohydrates to keep citric acid cycle churning. That's an important concept, really, in terms of diet, in terms of making enough energy. Okay, because if you don't have enough carbohydrates to help maintaining the integrity of these intermediates here, you can have all the acetyl-CoA in the world, but the citric acid cycle or Krebs cycle stops. Okay, so you need a little bit of carbs in your life to maintain the functionality of the citric acid cycle. Where does citric acid cycle occur? In the matrix of the mitochondria. What enters? Acetyl-CoA. What do you get out? There are a number, these are important things. Here's a list right there. Okay. Ultimately, from one glucose molecule, we get 6 NADHs. There's Mr. FADH. There's our 2 FADH2s that get produced. We get 2 molecules of ATP and 4 waste units of carbon dioxide. These go to the electron transport chain. This is waste. It's just removed, right? And I've gotten a couple ATP. And this, whoops, there we go. And this stays in the cell. This helps to keep funding the system. Okay. So I've got a whole whopping, 4 ATP now? It's not a whole heck of a lot of units of energy, right? So where in the hell is all this energy coming from? It's coming from the electron transport chain, NADH and FADH2. Okay. For every 1 turn, I guess, if you wanted to argue, okay, if you wanted to argue with me, well, no, acetyl-CoA entered into the citric acid cycle and got me 3 NADHs, 1 FADH2, 1 molecule of ATP, and 2 molecules of CO2. Yes, I couldn't argue. We're 100% correct. Okay, but remember, for each glucose molecule, I get 2 pyruvates, so I get 2 acetyl-CoAs. So citric acid or Krebs cycle gets turned around twice. Hence 6 NADHs, 2 FADH2s, 4 CO2s and 2 ATPs. All right. Either way you want to present it, I don't care. Okay. I don't care. If I was to ask that as a short answer question. If it's asked as a multiple choice or a matching, and if that's your thinking, then make sure you read the whole question. Okay. For each glucose molecule, citric acid cycle gives you that. Okay. For every acetyl-CoA molecule that enters, then it's half of that. 3, 1, 1, and 2. These NADHs and these FADH2s head over to the next step in the complete breakdown of glucose. And that's the electron transport chain.